Malossi is glad to present to you the professional assembly course for MHR products for the engine of a race scooter. Malossi wishes you happy viewing. Work on the original Carter motor. To the original Carter motor there are brought some modifications to allow for the assembly of the thermic group Malossi MHR team. The first modification regards the modification of the Carter motor, which is brought to 56.5 mm diameter to a depth of 90 mm. A necessary modification in that the Malossi cylinder has a large diameter collar, that is, of the part which is to be inserted in the Carter motor. Moreover, one must perfectly reconnect the connections of the Carter motor with those of the cylinder. Using the base packing gasket as a moulding, positioning it on the Carter and tracing the profile. At this point, using a maniple, remove the excess parts, seeking during the work process not to create depressions and damage to a good fluid dynamics. Chapter 1. Motor shaft. After having accurately washed with petrol or specific solvents for motors, position the two semi-Carter crankcase halves on a work level, keeping them raised. Insert a thermic feeler into the largest semi-Carter near the seat of the bearing and heat this with a fan until it reaches a temperature of around 160 degrees. Introduce the bearings washed with petrol and oiled into their seat in the Carter so that they are perfectly aligned with the Carter. This operation should be carried out quickly so that the bearing can be inserted comfortably into its position with the help only of the hands. Wait for some minutes so that the internal bearing ring, heating up, will dilate, thus consenting the insertion of the motor shaft into the Carter. Apply a small quantity of silicone gasket on all the holding plane of the first semi-Carter. Unite the second semi-Carter. Infiltrate all the screws into the Carter motor, screwing them without tightening. Fix the motor engine block on a suitable bracket so that it is ready. Hold steady the motor shaft by means of a fixed half pulley. Insert by hammering a spacer on the bearing of the semi-Carter at the side of the ignition. Put in also the nut and tighten it. Tighten all the cross screws with the dynamometric key calibrated to 11 Newton meters. In this way the Carter completely closes. Remove with a small cloth the silicone paste in excess. Verify that the motor shaft is centered, measuring with a feeler gauge the play between motor shaft and bearing on both sides. Proceed with the mounting of the oil seals using specific pins. Insert by hand the oil seal of the motor shaft, center it in the Carter and make it go in beat with the pin. Chapter 2. Thermic Group. Tighten the two exhaust manifold studs of the cylinder. Insert the piston ring inside the cylinder and press with the piston beyond the transfer and exhaust ports, making certain that it is positioned in a perpendicular manner. Verify with a thickness gauge that the distance between the two extremities of the elastic band gap is 0.15 millimeters. Whichever is the inferior value, shape with a diamond file the two extremities in a homogeneous way until obtaining the indicated value. Insert the elastic band in the piston and verify that it turns without impediment. Lubrify the seat of the piston pin with a motor oil and place the same piston pin. Mount the piston pin clip on a side of the piston. Take the cylinder head and insert it into both the upper and lower O-ring. Position in the cover of the head the held O-ring. Screw to the carter motor the 4 stud bolts supplied with the kit. Lubrify the needle roller and cage assembly with motor oil Malossi 7.1 and insert it into the eye of the connecting rod. Take the piston and mount it in the piston rod, pushing the piston pin towards the interior. Insert the other piston pin using the point to sign and assert that it is perfectly fitted in its fitting. Begin inserting the packing gasket of medium width into the stud bolts of the cylinder, lubrifying with care the cylinder liner with Malossi oil 7.1. With the Malossi thermic group there are supplied packing gaskets of various widths, necessary to calculate the value of the squish. That is the distance calculated top dead center between the piston crown and the head. Position the cylinder. The squish is measured by a tin strip of 1 mm width, position on the piston crown along the axle of the piston pin. Insert the head and tighten the 4 screw nuts with a spanner dynamo metric adjusted to 11 Newton meters. Using the semi-fixed Malossi pulley, rotate the motor shaft towards the top dead center, fixing the solder wire on the head. Repeat this operation 2 or 3 times, making sure that the solder wire doesn't move. Disassemble the head. Remove the solder wire and verify with a vernier caliper that the tightening of both the sides is compressed between 0.40 and 0.45 millimeters at the lowest point. The achievement of this value indicates the packing shim is of the correct thickness. If the measurement is different, it is necessary to substitute the gasketing with a different thickness and repeat the operation. Apply a thin layer of silicone gasket on the silicone packing determined with the earlier procedure, and insert it into the stud bolts of the cylinder. Mount the cylinder and, following this, the head, making sure that the compression holding O-ring is perfectly placed in its base. Tighten the screw nuts and fit them crosswise at 11 Newton meters. Insert the cover plate of the head, tightening the 3 socket head cap screws which fix it to the cylinder. Chapter 3. Ignition. Mount the fixing flange of the stator body on the carter motor and tighten the 3 flared screws which fix it. Using needle nose pliers, insert the wood rough key into its place in the motor shaft. Take the starter and pass the tension wiring cable inside the specific slot and position the starter in its opposite place, that is, on the flange. Insert the 3 M5 fixing screws without totally fixing them, in a way in which the stator is free to turn in the moment that it is put into stroke. Place the rotor on the crankshaft cone, making sure that it is perfectly in phase with the key mounted in precedence on the crankshaft. And tighten the fixing screw accurately to 13 Newton meters. Insert the dial gauge in the spark plug hole and bring the piston to the top dead center, rotating the rotor. Place at 0 the comparator, making sure that the 0 sign corresponds with the top dead center. Rotate the motor anti-clockwise up to 2.25 millimeters from the top dead center, and keeping the rotor still, moving the starter so as to coincide with the reference heel present on the starter and on the rotor itself.
No. No.
Align the reference heels and definitively fix the stator. One can proceed to the mounting of the inertia flywheel, fixing it with the 2 M6 Brueggeler screws. Before inserting the sparking plug, verify with a thickness gauge that the spark plug gap is 0.45 millimeters, and if the distance is higher, lightly fold the upper electrode until it reaches the indicated measure. Finally, tighten the spark plug. Chapter 4. Carburettor. Insert the flow optimizer insert into the reed valve block and connect this with the carter motor position. Mount the intake manifold on the lamellar pack. Before tightening the two screws which fix it, ascertain that the diameter of the collector coincides perfectly with that of the flow optimizer insert. The resulting connection, in fact, should be perfectly in line to allow for the optimum fluid dynamics performance. If the connection is not perfectly aligned, it could result in harmful turbulence. Insert the carburetor into the intake manifold and tighten the fastening clamp. Chapter 5. Transmission. Insert the hub inside the mobile half pulley bushing and position the 6 roller weights in the appropriate raceways of the same semi-pulley. Mount the 3 sliders to the ramp plate, paying particular attention to assert them in the correct side. Complete the assembly of the Variator, placing the cap cover on the mobile semi-pulley. Insert the scaling O-ring into the mobile semi-pulley of the posterior transmission and apply to its interior a layer of Malossi lubrification of molybdenum disulfide, furnished with the kit. Mount the guide ferrule in plastic on the thread of the semi-filled pulley and insert the correct couple corrector. Thread the 3 guide pins eyelet at 32 degrees, marked with a point, and completely fill all the 6 helical cavities with the grease. In this phase, it is indispensable to ascertain that the excess grease does not come out of the eyelet, depositing it on the edges of the semi-mobile pulley. Through the effect of centrifugal force, in fact, the grease would be pushed into the transmission, causing sliding, malfunctioning, and loss of power. Remove the guide ferrule in plastic and insert the guide spring into the mobile semi-pulley. Lodge the torsion controller inside the clutch. Insert the spring on the mobile semi-pulley. Position the clutch on the spring. Compress it. And tighten the fixing screw nut. Mount the transmission gears, inserting the wheel axle assembled previously and then the secondary gear. Apply a small quantity of silicone gasket on all the holding plane of the transmission case. Couple it with the carter motor, insert the 5 screws which fix it, and fasten them. Mount the water pump impeller on the motor shaft and insert the toothed belt which collects the two turners of the water pump. Position on the motor shaft the variator spacer and mount the variator, assembled previously. Insert the posterior transmission group with the relative transmission belt. Before mounting the fixed semi-pulley of the back variator, loosen the transmission belt in a way that in the mounting phase of the fixed anterior semi-pulley, when it is tightened, the belt does not impede the complete closure of the variator. Tighten the screw nut which fixes the anterior variator at 30 Newton meters and the fixing screw nut of the posterior group at 35 Newton meters. Chapter 6. Exhaust. Mount the exhaust collector on the cylinder, taking care to perfectly align the two holes of the cylinder exhaust, and tighten the two screw nuts which fix the flange to the cylinder. Mount the exhaust support bracket with the relative distancers furnished and tighten the two fastening screws. Insert the exhaust in the exhaust pipe union and insert the bolt fixer with its relative nuts between the exhaust and the support bracket.